Welcome to What to Do When, a podcast from real lawyers with real perspective, where we explore a variety of legal issues and scenarios. Each week, we focus on a new topic and discuss what to do when and if any of these legal scenarios ever happen to you or a loved one. With over 40 years of combined legal experience, our hosts offer their unique perspectives and insights on a range of real-life legal situations.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode. This is Jackie and Scott. Jackie, what's on the docket for today?
Well, today we're going to wrap up child support and changing child support once it's already been established. So you maybe have a child support order that's last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. How do you change it? What are the steps? What's needed in order to effectuate a change in child support?
And we affectionately call that, the term is a motion to amend child support.
Exactly right.
So what do you need for a motion to amend child support?
Well, what you're really asking the court to do is change an order that it already entered. And so in Virginia, what you're required to show first is that there's been a material change in circumstances since the last order was entered.
Yeah, and material change, folks, is pretty specific. In child support, it's easier than other things. There's a lot of material changes in the family law side. But what this is talking about is something that really changes the dynamic. And the few that really pop in my mind are somebody gets a better job, a job, or something where that income is affected a lot. Like usually, quite frankly, $100 isn't going to change it that much. But when you're talking a pretty big change, somebody maybe goes to salary and making $100,000 a year from
70 even.
Yeah. So it's that is a big thing. Income can be a big thing. What are some other things?
Another child or additional children by one or by the payor spouse or by the payor. So in other words, if dad's paying support and he's maybe remarried, maybe not, and had another child, then that extra child needs to be calculated into the child support.
And even, quite frankly, if the insurance really materially changes, for instance, maybe everybody was on Medicare before and now dad's covering insurance, those things can be a big deal because if dad's now paying $300 a month for the children, that's a pretty material change.
It is a big change. Sometimes you see, too, where the original order, the children or child was in child care, work-related child care, and now they're not. They're school age, they're in after-school programs, or they've aged out of child care. That, we all know, can be a really significant change in the calculations. And
also the other one is when the child turns 18 and has graduated from high school, then that's time to change the child support order. And a lot of times where that happens is that's usually more common with multiple kids because the order is considered one order for all the kids. So when you had 3 kids and you moved to 2, now it's a pretty big change usually because that calculation completely changes. So if you lose a kid because he graduates or something like that, then that would be a reason to change.
One other reason that comes to mind is if there's been a custody change or a material change in how many overnights the parents have each child. Or maybe there were several children. Maybe there were 2 children under the order and now one lives with the other parent and one lives with the first parent. I mean, there's lots of reasons to change, but those are material. Scott, can you think of something that would be a big change but wouldn't meet the criteria to get a change in a child support order?
Honestly, that's a little more difficult here. I can think of a lot of them for custody, but for these, I think really a big change could be a switching of a job, but the income really doesn't change. A lot of people assume just because he got a new job that the income's really going to be different, and a lot of times it's not that much different.
But what if the person changed jobs from a higher paying job to a much lower paying job and says, oh, well, I have a new job and I'm making less money? Is that good enough reason for a motion to amend?
No, and normally they're going to get beat on that because if your own choice lessens your income, then most of the time that's not going to be considered.
All right, well, how about this? What if the person who was paying got fired?
Yeah, that could be a tricky wicket. Most of the time that firing is going to be enough to change the child support, quite frankly. But if it's something you did to get fired and you can prove that you purposely got fired, then not so much.
I find that when someone is fired for cause, that's not enough to file a motion to, or to be successful in a motion to amend. You can file it really anytime, but to be successful. And also going to jail going to jail sometimes. In fact, I've never seen a judge change child support just because someone has gone to jail. Because it's the crime that they did that put them in jail, so their own action reduced their income.
Yeah, it's very true, and that's the whole point. Your actions can't reduce the child support, and then you go to the court and say, well, I did all these things, and now my income's lower, so you need to change it. You're probably going to fail on that. One other quick thing I want to say on this is, if you're thinking you're in a place to modify child support and do this motion to amend support, you really need to look at it before you file that motion, because sometimes the very change that you think is going to help you may in fact hurt you.
Well, and so how would somebody really know what that number, what the child support might change to? What should they do?
They really should contact a lawyer or have some help in this, or get somebody who knows what they're doing, because all those factors we talked about in the prior podcast come into this motion again. So once the door is open, and what that change of circumstance does is open the door for the court to say, okay, now I can look at it. So then you're starting at the beginning again, and you're putting in the income and the deductions and all the things that are coming out of it. So that has to be looked at. But I've seen it before where one of the parties' income increased a certain amount, and I thought for sure it was a good thing to file. It was a good motion, and it actually increased because the increase was actually so great. It increased my client's side, because remember, the total income is what they look at. And all of a sudden, my client, if she would have filed, would have paid a little bit more, and we're like, maybe we won't file. So, and the other thing I want to say about this that's really important, folks, is a lot of times parents get along really well, and Jackie and I were like, Johnny just turned 18 and graduated. Okay. And we were paying $600. Why don't we just, and there's 3 of them, so really we were paying $200 per child. Why don't we just pay $400 now? Is that a problem?
It's a problem unless the order says that you can do it, when they don't usually say that.
Yeah. It is a big problem. And I can't tell you, I've had 2 clients and that really, really the epitome of bad situations come into my office. And one guy had done that through all his children. And then for whatever reason, the wife got a burr in her that decided to take him to court. And he owed back support all the way to when he started paying less. Even though they had text messages and written documents between the 2 of them, they never changed the order. The judge didn't change the order. And the judge looked at him and said, he actually looked at the lady and said, what you're doing is heinous. I really think he was upset about it but my hands are tied. So he had to stick with the original order amount because it wasn't changed. So this guy ended up owing $60,000 to his spouse. So don't do that.
Well, the three main takeaways when you want to change your child support obligation is, first, you have to understand what is and what isn't a material change in circumstances that will effectuate a change in your support obligation. And remember that it can't be your own fault. And lastly, that it's always wise to meet with an attorney to run the numbers before you file to make sure that you can accomplish the desired result.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of What to Do When. For more episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, and we encourage you to check our archives to listen to previous topics. Tune in next week for a new episode and some fresh perspective from Critzer, Cardani.